Okay.
So when are we adding beer?
Root beer is always an option. All right, I'm going to get us started. And if someone else decides to join us, we'll gladly invite them. Today, we are going to be talking about two different episodes, episodes 7 and 8. So spoiler alerts if you haven't watched some of those episodes. So as always, I'm just going to start with the question though. What did you like? What did you appreciate? And we'll start with episode 7 first.
Oh, ask me, because I know.
I'm glad. We'll start with Judy then. Thank you, Judy, for volunteering.
I haven't watched any of this.
You haven't watched?
Oh, then spoiler alert.
Oh, okay.
I'm looking over my notes here.
One of the things that caught me was in 7 was Simon and Andrew basically switching roles.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew previously had the calm one.
Yep.
Where now he's going batshit crazy, excuse the expression, but
I've heard it before.
yeah, that's why I wasn't too worried about it. But Simon Peter was being the voice of reason.
Yeah. Some of Matthew rubbed off on him, but also too, he's experiencing something that is transformative. And in moments of crisis, in moments of fear, in moments of anguish, sometimes we're like that, where roles have to reverse, but it doesn't always stay that way. But it's also something to recognize the growth or the ability of change, or even just the circumstances that are going on.
I still like Philip.
You always like Philip? He's a good addition, you know.
He's like a calm because he's seen all the crazy.
Absolutely.
And he went off with Andrew into town, basically to ride herd on him and keep him out of trouble.
Sure.
I mean, that's what he was.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go with it.
Yep. And sometimes we need that friend, that voice of reason, that person who will calm us down and keep us collected. And sometimes we don't always listen to that friend either.
Well, that was kind of like from episode 6 when Simon and Matthew went to town.
Mm-hmm.
Like Mary.
Yeah.
Simon thought he was going to be in charge, but it was Matthew who took the lead role.
And was able to do a lot more.
Now Simon has learned from that experience and is trying to do the same with Andrew, but not quite successful at it.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyone else have anything that they really appreciated from episode 7? We're starting there. Cheryl.
Well, it does carry over into 8 because I had the same feeling as well.
Sure.
This just makes sense, but I never really considered that Jesus would have prepared what I think is the Sermon on the Mount. I mean, I just kind of thought he, kind of popped down on the ground or on a rock, whatever he did, and just happened to be in a good spot, and 5,000 men just happened to show up, and they brought along the women and children, who weren't part of that tally, which, for my logical brain, is forced to see that that's not really very logical. That doesn't make
potentially, yeah.
I mean, it could have happened that way, but, but I just never thought that he would have, because he's God. So does he think about sermons like you do? Does he like prepare for them, and does he work on, for months or whatever on it? You don't have to answer that part, but I don't know why I never considered that, because I think in all the movies or in the story, it just flows in the Bible, and I always forget the part that says there's a lot that we didn't write down because we just didn't have time.
I always got the impression that the Sermon on the Mount was actually a series of his sermons, and they kind of combined it to, put it all out there.
So I'm going to go back a little bit though. Cheryl, does having the Sermon on the Mount being I'll just say an event or a moment that is prepared for, does it change the significance of it?
I would say no. For me, it probably enhanced the significance of it, because I tend to think of Jesus as less human than God. And he probably think that, but I just think it's an interesting perspective to think he could have been like you. How do I say this?
Yep.
you know, what am I supposed to say? And I think this is probably gonna be a big deal. It's kind of where, from my perspective, where he started in episode 7. I think, you know, I think this requires a little planning, you know, and I never really thought of it that way, because I think of him just as fully God. He just shows up and the words magically.
And 5,000 people appear.
5,000 people just rock what they were doing. That's what they were doing.
Yep.
And I never considered, well, that's probably season 8, but I never considered where it took place and where all of those people came from.
Sure.
Because that's what 10,000
I did not
is.
like that.
You didn't like episode 8?
No, I.
Okay.
it
We'll
reminded me of, like,
We'll get to there in just a little bit. Sorry. I don't mean to stop the conversation.
It never, I just took it as fact. This is
Sure.
how the Bible said it happened, so it must have happened. And they didn't write a summary, so.
They didn't.
I know, I actually think it's helping me understand. I like the thought that Jesus is thinking about what he's gonna say, because it makes me feel better when I have to give a presentation. No, I mean.
Even Jesus has to prepare for his presentations.
I wonder if he does this like, no, but, that makes him more like me.
Well, I think they intimated that when Jesus was talking with John the Baptist. And John the Baptist just said whatever came in his head.
Yep.
And John said, well, you need to do this. And Jesus said, no, I need to prepare and get it right.
I didn't make that connection. That's cool.
It is.
It makes him more human, which doesn't take away from his spiritual side,
No.
but it makes him more relatable. Maybe that's it.
Well, and I'll point out too, who does Jesus call to help him put things together? Your favorite person, Matthew. Yeah, Jim.
Well, it always bothered me that, like in Matthew, he starts off with the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount right after he calls his first 2 disciples.
Yep.
And it just says he goes up to the mountain and he starts preaching to thousands of people.
Yep.
So where did they all come from? How did they know where to go? Well, did he? It seemed like it was a summary of his entire preaching, and it came out right at the start. And in a sense, that made a lot of sense to place it there.
Yep.
But he hadn't even called Matthew to be his disciple until well after that, and when you're reading Matthew.
I
It's-
wonder how that was.
Yeah. There's a little bit of order, I'll just say, that does get thrown out. But at the same time, too, what they're trying to do with The Chosen is try and put it in a sequence of events that will tell the overarching story. Not necessarily tied directly to the Gospels, but this also gives the perspective, too, of what is it really all about? Do they fully understand what is happening, what their role is? Even Matthew himself, there are times where he's giving advice as Jesus is writing his own sermon, and Jesus kind of has to think about that and says, oh, I didn't think about it in that way, but I do need to consider that. And so when Jesus wanted to start off the sermon, or excuse me, now we're getting into episode 8. Let me go back to episode 7. My apologies.
It's hard to separate.
It is. That's one of the reasons too why I wanted to put them a little bit together. But in episode 7, I'm going to go back just a little bit here. Here, Jesus is talking about the preparation. And he's talking that each one of you will have a role. We do the same thing for Sunday morning worship. Each and every one of the people has a role. If one person doesn't do that role, all of a sudden people are like, where were the scripture readings? Did they not show today? Were we doing this intentionally? What was the role? What's the reason for that? When the bread is different and we're using wafers, people notice. But it's one of those things, if we don't prepare, if we don't take that time, that effort, that energy, and some people are going to notice those small details. But at the same time, too, the details do matter. of what it is our role is, our part is. Now, some people also look at their preparation for Sunday morning as just a task. This is something I need to do. I have to do it. But that's not really what Christ is calling them to do. It's how are you preparing not only your own heart, your own mind, and what's your contribution to this greater purpose of worship? Now, that doesn't mean it can't change. That doesn't mean that the role can't change or the meaning can't change from person to person. But are you even focusing on that? Or is it simply, I've got to do this and I've got to get it done so I can get on to the next 25 things that are on my to-do list?
Sometimes.
For some people, yes, but I'm hoping too that it's not the case. And Jesus really gives them time and energy and says, go and do this. And if you need help, ask the others. Because if you notice, he divides them up into groups of 2 or 3. You 2 are responsible for this. Go find a location. You 2, you're going to be responsible for this. You're going to be setting up what is the experience going to be like. That way I can focus on the message. It was one of those things that as a pastor, and especially going through the bulletin week after week, I'm like, wow, that's exact. Wait, I do that. Wonder who the hymn selection person is for Jesus. We haven't found that person yet. But also too, there's some things that we haven't really thought about. There's some things that we haven't necessarily thought of as we're just simply reading through the scriptures until we visually see it, or they put it into perspective in such a way that all of a sudden, oh, yeah, that does make sense, but I never thought about it that way. And Dallas in The Chosen is trying to open up our minds a little bit of what if Jesus did this where he could have easily had people there, but instead he wanted to make it important. I want you to know that this is coming. The first thing I thought of when they were preparing for everything is the circus. I mean, it's one of those obscure little things, but when you're a little kid and you hear the circus is coming to town, what are you talking about for the next 3 to 5 days? The circus is coming. The clowns are going to be here. The animals are going to be here. Oh, I'm so excited. I wonder if they're going to be juggling. I wonder if the ringmaster's going to have this. I wonder if the lion's going to. And you're just so excited about it that it almost builds some anticipation. And then when you actually get there, you're like, it's bigger than I thought it was going to be. The elephants are huge. That you're just simply amazed by it.
I think the other thing that goes along with all that, it's very much what the Sermon on the Mount, and I'm kind of pushing towards episode 8, so maybe that's the way we go. But it's very much like a church service, as you alluded to. What Jesus's disciples are basically uneducated fishermen and bearers of burden, laborers, if you will. They don't know how to do this stuff. So Jesus has got to train them.
In some regards.
So, because he's not going to stay around for a long time, and he's trying to build the church. And so he's got to train them how to do that and carry on.
I'll say I agree with you to a degree. Some of them are laborers, but not all. Because if you think of Matthew,
Well, true.
he is not a laborer.
But he's not educated in the church.
In doing this. Correct.
Anything in the church.
Right.
I mean, he's having to study and learn the Psalms and all of that. So in essence, in terms of the church, he is uneducated.
In the terms of church, he's uneducated, but he's knowledgeable in this area. The men who are laborers have knowledge of the church, but have no idea how to do this over here, how to keep track of these things. And then if you notice some of the others coming from they're great at celebrating parties. They're great at organizing. And yet what really surprised me here in some of this planning, he's not utilized very much. Jesus is more in that role, and he's allowing others to take that role. So we actually have this person knows how to do this. This person knows how to do this. This person knows how to do this. And this person needs to know how to do this. That's what we do in the church. I mean, when we come together for counsel, I don't know how to do everything. And there's some parts of the ministries, I do not want to know how to do this. I need you to take care of it so that I have no fingers in that pie. You can be the taste tester. You can be the one in charge of it. But I want to know it's getting done.
We've been in churches where the pastor had to have his finger in every
Yeah.
and it's not fun.
It can work for some, but more often than not, it becomes too much of a club, for lack of a better term.
And that church went through a great decline
Sure.
and had to learn
How to do. Yep. So the last point, oh, yes,
I have a question today, that's kind of building on what they said.
sure.
We know, generically speaking, that the Old Testament, the way it's put together, is not necessarily chronological. Because if you want to read it in chronological order, you don't go Genesis, Exodus. They group together, especially the further along you get it.
Mm-hmm.
So isn't it possible? I mean, like within the books of the Bible, that they're not written in chronological
Oh, they're not.
order. I mean, we know, so it would make some sense that, and Matthew could be, what we call the Sermon on the Mount could literally be a compilation of some different stories. And think about, like, if I'm writing a letter to somebody, it's great now because, you know, you're typing it on your computer and you can go back and insert sections.
Yep.
But when I was little as a child and was writing notes to grandparents, or even if I'm handwriting things when we're on vacation, I always get to the end and think there's something I left out at the beginning, so I'm just going to tack it on right here. It
Yes.
has nothing to do with chronological order.
Mhm.
It's just where I decided to put it.
Mhm.
Or, you know, like,
What's important or what comes to the forefront of your mind?
right.
Yeah.
My cousin found a letter that my mom had written to her sister
Mm-hmm.
about my cousin being born.
Sure.
Not in that letter. We didn't know. But she started with, you know, I'm so excited that Diana's here. I had no idea she was coming this soon. And this is this whole section. And then she goes on at the bottom to talk about this trip that she's on. Well, that's obviously not in chronological order.
Right.
And it's possible that Matthew put it, or any of them could have put things in slightly different order to show a different kind of emphasis.
I'm just gonna, yes, I agree with you. And I'm gonna take just one quick step back and say in the Old Testament, it is mostly in chronological order, but even between Christians and Jews, we have them in two different orders. So Christians had this novel idea of moving things around so that the prophets are at the end, so then it points to Jesus in the New Testament. For the Jews, no, we don't need to, no, we have it the way we have it because that's the way it happened. Correct. And also too, even in the New Testament, we have a different order of things. Paul's letters have actually been written before the Gospels were written. And more than likely, the Gospels were not written by the actual authors. It would have been a student or someone who was, this is really good, we should write this down. Who's taking notes? No one? We need to start taking notes, people. And so I just want you to be aware of that it's also the part of that reality. Okay, two things, yes.
Yeah, I was thinking, I think that's one of the reasons why Jesus selected Matthew to help him prepare for his sermon.
Sure.
Sermon or sermon.
Yep.
Because he was always taking notes. And you can see from Matthew, it seems like a very thorough interpretation of the Sermon on the Mount.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I've always wondered, you know, when, even I think maybe the first time I heard about the Sermon on the Mount, how, if there were that many people there, how anybody heard it.
Oh, yeah.
It's not Jesus in the amphitheater.
Nope.
I know if I was in the back, I'd keep going, he said.
Uh-huh.
So.
And what we see that they're setting up for, preparing for, we'll be talking about in episode 8 here, but that's some of what they're doing is we need to find a land in which people can gather and hear. We want to plan for people. But even Matthew, in his talking with Jesus of, okay, you want to start out with this, you are the salt of the earth. Well, what if people can't hear and all that they hear is salt the earth? What are they going to think of? They're going to think of these wars in which the Romans literally did salt the earth so that anyone who tried to rebuild, then they could not. And so even Matthew is trying to say, I get what you're saying. Will the people hear it that way? Are you recognizing the words that they're going to then associate and a message that goes, whoo? And then you're going to have to try and, no, come back, people.
Well, even just, the physics of it, I don't think there's any mountain or anything that somebody could be on where you could actually project your voice and have it heard by that many people without microphones. I mean, think about whenever you've gone to a rock concert, and that person was up there singing without a microphone, there, all you would hear would be instrument.
Sure. It's one of those things. There are certain places where you can go and you are going to have a natural amphitheater, kind of that echo effect of where if you do speak, and this is where too, you need to keep in mind, it's a little bit like a church service, okay? Everyone hopefully is listening. But yes, you're probably going to have a few kids wandering around going, this is so much fun. And then you're going to have some people that are going, what did he just say? Shh, I'm trying to listen. That you're going to have a little bit of that back and forth. But hopefully people are, that's amazing. I'll look away, don't worry. But hopefully too, there's a desire to want to learn. I mean, if you're showing up, you're taking time from your day, you're taking time from everything else that you could do, whether that's sleeping on the couch watching the football game, and they might win, they might not, but hey, if you're there or not, does it really matter? We like to think it does, but it really doesn't, sadly. Versus now you're doing this.
I was wondering if that was, part of it was there were sections of it where we see the power of God, the bread and the fish and all of that. So is it possible through the power of God that his voice became like a booming voice from heaven, and that way everybody can hear it? But they have to go into that.
We haven't found that out yet.
The Bible.
Yep. And we'll see too, does the wind blow and carry his voice to the people? I mean, it's one of those things that there are several ways that they could address this. I'm going to go back though to one more thing that we haven't talked about. That's kind of a big deal. Jesus becomes arrested. Detained. Words with Rome, does it matter what words they use? As Simon would say. Was it? It was one of the brothers that were on the fishing boat. But it's one of those things. What does it do to the disciples? Shakes them up. It gives them a fear of, oh, is this the Messiah? What's going to happen? What if he does leave? And what happens to us?
I mean, they kind of start that. Andrew is not himself. That was the episode. I think we were talking about it last week. Joel and I.
Sure.
This seems to be the episode where, like you're saying, Simon seems to have changed. He seems to accept the people. But to me, Andrew just kind of, I was like, he was doing so good there for so, and he just kind of spun out of control. It's almost like, you have this nice, quiet child, and all of a sudden something happens in their life, and they become the rowdy one. And,
yep.
And it's almost like his personality change. He becomes frantic that they need to do, and I get it because of what's
transpiring.
Baptist. I mean, there's a pattern here. We know what Rome does with these people, and but they kind of set it up at the beginning that it started to how they're emotionally feeling. They let his character verbalize it, but it's like he kept looking for people to blame. So he got to the point where he blamed Mary. It's you. In other words, we wouldn't have still been here. They couldn't have still found us if you hadn't left. And he just lost it, which I thought was an interesting way to portray him.
Yeah.
And it made me anxious watching,
Mm-hmm.
which was good. I was like, okay, that's what you wanted.
That's what he wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, Jim.
Can I get back to the business for just a minute?
Sure.
Now,
Come back to the physics for us.
in Carrollton, I know that when I'm out for a walk, there's always jets flying overhead, and there's a certain amount of background noise.
Yes.
And so we can't hear very far from them. But when we visited my brother when he had little kids, and they lived out in the country in South Dakota,
Mm-hmm.
we could hear those kids playing a quarter of a mile away. It was uncanny.
Yep.
And so when it's absolutely quiet, like it may have been in, first century or.
Yep.
There weren't any jets.
Probably no jets. There might have been a car horn every now and again. You saw the blooper reel.
Yeah, we heard, did you get the outtakes at the end of?
Yes.
When they have a horn?
Yep.
Oh, shoot, I didn't watch.
So in episode 8, spoiler alert, watch past the credits. There's about 5 or 6 minutes of bloopers and other things that they added in. So sorry, Jim.
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted to say. Your ear picks up when it's absolutely perfectly quiet. Your ear picks up tremendously quiet sound.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Like the stars you can see when you get away from the lights.
Yeah. You go out into the country and all of a sudden there's a lot more of those. Huh.
Interesting is Jesus always referred to as teacher.
Yes.
And obviously, he's had a career bringing him to this point. It seems like now he's trying to go from a classroom or
Mhm.
small area to a much grander scale.
Yeah.
And we're showing what he has to do to get there.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the arrest.
I like some of them.
Go ahead.
Jesus responsive. I mean, it kind of made me chuckle.
Yeah.
I read some of it, I could, it's like Quintus, right? I expected you to be scruffy, which I don't know what he said.
He expected it more like his cousin.
Yeah, and Jesus was like, glad I could disappoint you.
Uh-huh.
I need to remember that, next time somebody says, I thought you'd be whatever, it's like, glad I could disappoint.
Yeah.
And they threw in a couple of like, you don't think, and the way he talked to him, he never agreed. He's like, I can't make you do anything. Basically what you want and what my father wants, we don't lie,
Yep.
whatever. But he was always very respectful.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when we're trying to get a point across with people, we get very frustrated, like, I can't get this.
Mm-hmm.
And his character never lost, that.
Yeah.
I liked that.
Yeah.
I don't think he felt threatened by it.
Right.
I mean, almost like he had advanced knowledge of how it was going, that meeting was going to come out.
Correct.
And just what my father wants.
Mm-hmm. But even Quintus seemed to, I want to make sure my point gets across, but I really don't have any authority to make you do anything yet. So even the back and forth was a little bit of, I'll say a little bit of dynamics, where we have a spiritual side and an earthly side of things. We had earthly power of the sword, and we had a spiritual power of the heart. Both are wanting calm and peace, but sometimes we need a little bit of chaos in order to recognize why we have both and how it is they rely on each other. Quintus made a point to say to Jesus, you've done some things for Rome that have just been fabulous. We could never have done that. But then he undercuts that whole compliment by, but your race of people are so beneath, I could never hire you. And it's like, okay, well, you could just leave the land then, and you wouldn't have to worry about any of that. But then Jesus goes, yeah, you want the land, but the people are here. And also then too, there's a back and forth in which Quintus wants to give a last jab to Jesus. I heard about your cousin. That wasn't very smart of him. Well, what he had done is gone into King Herod, not a Roman, but a king put in place by the Romans. So when he insulted him, he insulted Rome as well. But also Jesus knows why, what, and he's had to prepare himself. Sometimes we ourselves can prepare for some things that we know are going to happen. Yet when they do happen, we don't know how to react. We don't always know how to hold our composure. We have to bite our tongue, as sometimes our mothers reminded us. And if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. But boy, is that hard in the moment, because you'd love to say something. Yet Jesus knows it's not my time yet. Not here, not now. I'll get my time.
I think it's interesting that Quintus thought he was dealing with just a man. The other guy, Gaius.
It wasn't Gaius. It was
The other Roman that was in the room with him.
yes.
I think he realizes that Jesus is more than just a man, but I don't think he realizes how much yet.
He doesn't know how to classify him. He's an unknown. He doesn't know if he's a witch, some kind of sorcerer or some kind of magician who's, hey, it's sleight of the hand, and all of a sudden people are impressed. Whoop-de-doo. As long as you don't cause problem, I don't care. But what really stopped him in his tracks was when he got a zealot, someone who was bent on destroying Rome, to drop his weapon. Part of that is in the teaching of the zealots. You are devout to God, and it will be with this weapon that you will bring forth the kingdom of God. So to lay aside that sword or that weapon is to lay aside the kingdom of heaven.
Give it up, really.
Yes, which is exactly what he did. And it amazed him. I thought I could only do that with another weapon. What do you mean I could do that? How did he do it? What is it I need to learn? And so there's a little bit of a mystery there, where he's also been looking down on these people, and yet he has such an elevated status, even above Gaius, or excuse me, above Quintus. Boy, these Greek names. We need a flow chart. We'll get a pictorial directory put together by one of these times. Yeah.
Picture board like they do in SVU or something.
There we go.
Show wikis.
They're
very important.
Yes.
especially when they're adapting books.
Show wikis. I wonder if there is one for the chosen. I'll have to look. I'll have to see. Maybe we can share one if we do find it. So if someone does, please email me. Yeah, Jim.
I found that conversation to be very interesting. He seemed to be a very educated person. Probably, well, he was a military person, but he was really into politics and such. You can tell the way he was thinking.
Yes.
Now Jesus, when he got back from Egypt and he went before the rabbis, they were amazed at him. I'm convinced he got some kind of an education down in Egypt.
Oh.
It's one of the best schools down there. So you have two people who stand out in this kind of country where there's not a lot of educated people.
Yes.
And they're having a conversation between the two of them. So there's a natural bonding between them. It was fascinating the way that the back and forth of that conversation went, and neither one of them seemed to be too. There wasn't a lot of stress. It was interesting.
Yeah, and even Quintus says to Jesus, "I'm so glad I got to meet you. I've heard stories about him," but he does it in such a jovial way that it's almost a little condescending. But even at the end, Jesus butters him up and says, "It was an absolute pleasure I got to meet you today." And he just kind of, yeah, it was, wasn't it? like it was, okay, so he's very much an ego person, but he also appreciated Jesus in his approach. And he says to him, we're going for the same thing here, for the people, but we're approaching it differently. Okay, I think we've made enough jumps into 8 already. Anything else on episode 8? Judy, did you have anything right up front?
I just,
Mhm.
we're talking about the Sermon on the Mount. And we're all making assumptions that everybody heard everything. Maybe they didn't. I mean,
Potentially.
Maybe just the French people got to hear it, and then just, groups would talk and they would flow back. I mean,
It's very possible it becomes the first small group sessions of those that are up front. Okay, you're going to go teach the guys in the back who probably didn't hear so well. So begin.
I just, we just assume everybody heard everything.
Yeah,
Maybe they didn't.
that's true.
And your physics thing is kind of flown out the door because we're sitting here and I can hear all of them laughing and yelling and everything. There's it was 10,000 men, and then we figured it's about 30,000 with the women and.
So there's 5,000 men.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. But it's one of those things, we don't know if the women and children are counted, so we assume that they weren't.
Yeah.
So.
So when you're talking about that many people,
Mhm.
that much, even if they're trying to listen, we're coughing, sneezing, moving around.
Yep.
The kids aren't quiet. I still say it entirely unlikely that people in the back heard.
We'll have to find out in season 3 what happens.
Maybe he'll just.
But I do like the idea of the small group. Passing it on back.
There's a couple of possibilities.
There was a reason that the Greeks figured out how they came.
That's true.
And there are natural amphitheaters
But
in the
Judy,
landscape.
it
Yep.
would be like that game Whisper,
Oh, yeah.
where you start a phrase and whisper it down, and when you get to the end, it's nothing like the original phrase.
Yeah, you don't want to play those games of telephone. Oh, they never go well. Because then that's when you go from you are the salt of the earth to salt the earth.
I'd be surprised if it take that.
Well, that's true. So in episode 8, we see a lot of things starting to come back together. We're introduced to someone, though, from a side story. A man is learning from another man how to become a deal maker. And they're approaching this person to buy his land that has been in his property for 40 generations. Now think about that for a moment. The stories, the lives that land has probably seen. And now you have to try and sell it. And we find out later who that man is. Do you remember who that is? It's Judas. So we're introduced to Judas and what he is getting trained to do. Now, many of us, well, we know what's going to happen. Oh, we don't like Judas already. Oh, he's a deceptor. And yet, if you really listen to his words, he has ambition. I want to do something great. It's not just something for here and now. I want to do something that's going to have a lasting effect. And even from his teacher, he says I feel like we betrayed the man. I mean, we're looking for salt on his land. We know that there's going to be great wealth there, and yet all we gave him was 50 shekels. Yeah, a year's wages, but we're going to do what to him? And it's almost like we're getting a glimpse as to who Judas really is instead of what history has labeled him to be. Because you can be defined for one moment in your life, but that doesn't mean that's all who you were.
That's exactly what Matthew said in 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
do you want to be defined by the mistake that, or by your past? Or,
Right.
you know, I know he's referencing Mary, but we do tend to define people by their, I'll say things we don't agree with. It may not have been a mistake, but, you know, there's that
Mhm.
one event and it tends to wipe out the other
Yep.
things that they did.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it's why some people get the nickname of Stinky, or, you know, something along those lines, where it's like, that's what you want to be known for? No, that's what the name that was given to me. I didn't want it. But here also, we had more people coming together. That Jesus is preparing for this great speech, this great sermon. And we begin seeing some people from season 1 that we haven't seen in a while. We saw Barnabas. You remember Barnabas from season 1, where he comes around and, well, what good things can come from Nazareth? That was hilarious. Oh, never mind. Or we have the woman who is blind, who is sharing with Mary, formerly Lilith, in one of her very first Passover meals, where she was invited as a guest. We begin to see some of the people coming together. And we begin to wonder what's going to happen next. Where will this go? And we're left with Jesus taking a step on stage.
That's what.
I believe those are called cliffhangers.
No, I'm talking about the whole carnival.
Oh, the carnival aspect of it?
Oh, where this color goes with your eyes. You know, I was like,
He actually said that. I don't care. But the women were, but we're in a rock quarry. You're going to blend into the background. We want you to stand out. And each of the colors that they brought forth had a meaning to it. Blue with peace, comfort. Well, what about purple? The color of royalty. Or what about gold? Wealth, knowledge. Or what about, I don't remember what, red, passion and blood.
Yeah, I don't think he was, at that point, it's like he wasn't ready for the red color. That's the one thing I thought, I bet we'll see him in red at some point,
Probably.
but I thought, no, he's not gonna.
He wasn't ready for the purple.
Mm-mm.
But I thought it was interesting, Prince of Peace, that was the first time, and it was his Emma, I think. It was
Yes,
Mary,
it was Mary.
not Mom, who used that term, Prince of Peace.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But it's also shadowing, and this goes back to, I'll say, liturgical or non-liturgical churches. Many liturgical churches will have colors for different seasons. And sometimes we've talked about those here as to what do they mean? Why do we have white on these days? Why was it red? Why was it green? Why is that so important? And for some people, it doesn't matter. I just want my chair. Someone sitting in my chair. Why are you in my chair? Versus, I wonder what that means. Well, I'm here. It doesn't mean something.
Well, I think that part is.
No, I know, but
I don't know, Jim Tammy came to mind. You know, all the graphics and the.
Sure.
And I was like, I always thought it would be more organic,
Sure,
the whole thing.
I understand.
And the stage and, you know.
Mhm.
I just-
There's the disconnect there too of what it is we've expected it to be, but what if it wasn't that way? And what if Jesus was actually making time and space for people to say, hey, this matters. You've heard about me. This is where I'm going to be. And it's starting my ministry. I know it.
Someone through the curtains, like, ta-da!
Right. There's that. At what point is it a sermon or a worship service to when does it become a show? And we don't want it to become a show. We want it to have meaning. We want it to have closeness of God. But where is that line? And there's that distinction too of what it is we expected from this and what it is that Jesus wants the people to really get.
Well, I was with this.
I know.
I would have had people walking along the hill in silence. And then, nothing.
I'll let you talk to Dallas on that one.
Yeah. I'm thinking too about, the people in the back, which
I know.
feel like after seeing this, it probably was the women and children that were in the back, because that's where they would have been in any other worship service. They would have been front. But, the women were like, they won't be able to see. I mean, first of all, you're gonna be teeny tiny.
Yep.
They won't even know where you're standing.
Yeah.
If you're not careful, because they can't see. They
Mhm.
can't distinguish.
Right. You're going to blend into the
Or one
background.
who's speaking. Like she said, what did you say? It's like a voice booming from somewhere, but they won't necessarily know it's you. So the more I think about it, I think it is maybe Dallas's way of saying, just think about it for a minute. What if it's not the way that you always thought it was?
Sure.
I'm not convinced that that season 3 is gonna start with that theme. I'm really not, because he could easily say, think about it on your own. I mean,
Yeah.
you interpret from this point, but I think it's a lot of a question. Just what if the Bible isn't exactly in chronological order? What if something can do is that, I think his goal is to strengthen our faith,
Yes.
but what does that do? Does it give you a different perspective? So,
It's something that we haven't seen how it's going to unfold. And so we're in some regards, we're left on that cliffhanger going, okay, what am I supposed to do here? Am I supposed to go up or am I supposed to drop down? It's really cloudy, so I can't see the bottom. Am I close to the bottom? What am I supposed to do here? Or am I just supposed to wait? And right now we're left waiting.
I think going back to some of the physics of all that,
Mhm.
curtain has a purpose.
It does.
There.
It
so
does.
that the sound doesn't escape from behind him, but it's reflected out to the audience to help them hear.
And it's also a sound deadener from the waves and other things that are on the other side. But yes, I understand.
It would even be better if he had somewhat of an awning over the top of him to keep the sound from going up and like that out, but it is what it is.
Remember, he didn't have much of a budget.
He did have an architect on his payroll.
He did. Yeah, Jim.
There was another complexity in there. You had all the Roman soldiers, you even had Jesus on his horse there.
Yeah.
And so what Jesus says has to continue to be part of the representative of his ministry.
Yes.
And also he has to be very careful about the words he uses so that it doesn't seem to threaten Rome.
Fish and bones, flesh and bones.
It's one of those things. We'll have to see how it unfolds. Because you have, I'll just say the soldiers that are there, and I'll talk about them in a second. But we also have now thousands of people that are going to be there. And they outnumber those soldiers quite a bit. The other thing is, we don't know why those soldiers are there. Are they ordered to be there? Because we didn't hear about any orders. Or are they there of their own desire? The one thing I will mention though is this. When we think about the Roman soldiers, we need to think about it a little bit in our own modern context, because that would be a little bit more reflective for us. Your average soldier is like your police officer, okay? They have a sword, they have a weapon to use. And if need be, they will use deadly force. They have the authority to do that. And so there's this fear of what they could do to me, but at the same time too, there's that hope that you're not gonna do that to me. But if you notice, Quintus and he has a few others ride in on horses. That's like our modern day artillery or tank. A lot more firepower, a lot more speed, a lot more ability to do things. I mean, have you ever tried to outrun a horse? You're not going to do it unless, well, the horse may be lame, but that's a whole other discussion. It's one of those realities that we sometimes need to think about. that when they see that, there's a little bit of fear and animosity, but also too, they had the numbers. That if they wanted to, they could subdue those soldiers if they wanted. And that's part of what Rome is fearing. Is that what Jesus is going to do, is raise up an army? Any last questions or thoughts? Otherwise, I just want to mention a few other things about the next coming few things, so.
I just put on one thing that the discussion made me think of.
Uh-huh.
Jesus comes through a split curtain to be with the people. And in the temple, it's
Yeah.
not split. We know what happens when he dies. We know it's ripped in half, but
Right.
it's one solid piece of cloth. And I wonder if, no, but they wouldn't have gotten it then, but
No.
if that's a little bit of Dallas's symbol. I mean, he's already broken through, we assume he's gonna go through, but you know,
Mhm.
that he's broken through that to be with the people. It's almost.
I'll say that there could be some foreshadowing there. It's also just practical. So it's hard to say. I mean, you could interpret it either way. So. Anything else? Okay, I'm gonna pause this.